Welcome to the first presentation on assortment planning.
In this presentation, we are going to introduce theories and concepts that support assortment planning. This presentation was compiled for you by Dr. Hari Prasad of the National Institute of Fashion Technology in India, Dr. Jessica Hurst of Iowa State University, Dr. Jane Swinney of Oklahoma State University, and Ms. Danielle Sponder-Testa of Iowa State University. It is narrated by Ms. Danielle Sponder-Testa. This presentation is intended to introduce key concepts of assortment planning and the difference within large and small retailers. Some of you may have experience with assortment planning, while others will not, but we're going to approach this from the beginning with key concepts introduced. It should be noted that the foundational concepts being introduced will come from an American retailing perspective and originate with large retailers, but can be applied on a smaller scale. There are handouts with terminology that coincide with this presentation. So, for instance, ECR stands for Efficient Consumer Response. It's shown on slide 3 of this presentation, which is also in the downloadable PowerPoint presentation, and can also be found on the supplemental handout available on our website. There is also a supplementary presentation that will walk you through how to use the assortment planning tools that we have provided for you. It's a more practice-based presentation that will allow you to take the concepts learned here and apply them to your business. If you're looking at these two presentations together, we highly recommend you watch this presentation first prior to going through the second assortment planning presentation.
Merchandising is the planning, developing, and presenting of product lines for the identified target market. It includes the pricing, assortment planning, styling, and timing of a merchandise assortment. What is the purpose of merchandising and of planning your assortment? If you think it through, the purpose is to meet your customers' needs and wants. The goal is to have the right product in the right place at the right time in the right quantities. Beyond this broad-based goal, you are aiming to know what your customer wants before they know what they want. The goal of merchandising is to predict demand. Our job as merchants is to combine a variety of types of market knowledge to make decisions on the amount of product, the price of the product, the color of the product, and when to sell the product. As you can see in some of the supplemental handouts, a lot of these decisions are based on numbers because we can predict a lot of what will happen in the future based on what has happened numerically in the past. But there are also other elements that are based on trend, style, and competitor insights. A lot of a product category is also aesthetic and personal. This has to also be considered within merchandising. There is also an element of intuition and market understanding, knowing your customer on that intuitive level.
As Henry Ford said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. But what did he do? He made the automobile. Being in tune with what customers really want and need can allow for the best assortment decisions. What to buy might not be the same thing you bought last season. Now, in a fashion example, this might mean taking a risk on a small amount of silver sequin pants, not necessarily inventing a new form of transportation. But the point is to know your customer so well that you know what they want before they do. Knowing the customer will look very different from a large to small retailer. With a small retailer, you may go to market with a specific consumer in mind. You may look at a collection and say, this product looks like Sarah, or this looks like Joe, so I'll buy a little bit of it with that specific consumer in mind. But as a retailer grows larger, it becomes more of a numbers game, and the preemptive knowledge has to be more big picture.
Efficient consumer response, also referred to with the abbreviation ECR, refers to advanced planning, process analysis, and database analysis. This allows you to determine customer wants in advance. Elements of this include creating a plan at the beginning of the season that won't change. This is to say, I know in advance that maybe I'm going to sell $100,000 of jeans. That's my plan, and that's what I'm going to work for. But then throughout the season, you're going to adjust as you see how the customer is actually responding. This is your in-season process analysis. You're going to adjust based on current trends and current purchases. Then you might change your plan or change your forecast to adjust for what is actually happening. That actual original plan number won't change. It's a number referred to as the forecast that would be adjusted based on that process analysis. That way you can see from that beginning plan to your end forecast how much you needed to change from the beginning to the end of the season. It's also important to understand your customers' activities while they're in the process of shopping. That's why you change the numbers within the season. So that's what allows you to reforecast in the season. Within all of this, you have to use databases to plan the assortment so that the merchandise the customer wants is available when the customer wants it. Timing is crucial, especially if you want to avoid markdowns and loss of profit. Additionally, if you don't avoid markdowns and loss of profits, you risk having a poor impression in the consumer's mind and risk losing a great relationship with those customers. All of these elements show the importance of an efficient consumer response. Assortment planning is critical because this is how you maximize your market share. Market share is based on who makes the most money, but having the right assortment will maximize sales, but specifically maximizes full price sales. Having the right depth can be incredibly critical, as can the right timing. Otherwise, you'll end up having large racks of markdowns. Assortment accuracy is crucial for both manufacturers and retailers, but they both face a lot of challenges. Manufacturers are competing with other manufacturers for the best price as they all have a lot of product available. So if they don't plan their assortments well, they lose that sale to a different manufacturer. Retailers also face a lot of challenges. Particularly in the US, retailers are overmalled, so there's a lot of competition and fear of sameness, i.e., fear that everyone will have the same thing. Therefore, it is increasingly important that retailers have the right product for the specific customer, and that has a lot to do with the timing, pricing, and quantity, as well as the style details. So how do you gain market share? That all comes back to what we've been talking about, having the right product at the right place at the right time. What this also means is that you have to avoid stockouts, meaning avoid running out of stock, whether you're a manufacturer or a retailer. A stockout is exactly what it sounds like. It's when you run out of stock, not having the right SKU when the customer wants it. This can be detrimental to small retailers because it may mean you are no longer their top of mind retailer. If you don't have the product they're looking for in stock numerous times, they're more likely to go somewhere else to try and find that product. On the other hand, a retailer with a lot of money to spend on marketing may be able to get the customer back in store and get a second chance. Either way though, stockouts cost a retailer money because they result in a lost sale. How do you prevent a stockout? Through adequate assortment planning. The global average of retailers out of stock is 8.3%. That means that shoppers will have a 52% chance of fulfilling a 10-item shopping list without encountering a stockout. Despite the initiatives designed to improve the collaboration of retailers and their suppliers, such as efficient consumer response that we talked about previously, and despite the increasing use of new technologies like radio frequency identification, RFID, and point of sale, POS, data analytics, this situation has improved little over the past decade. For large retailers, as you can see here, one of the biggest challenges is just in-store replenishment. You can see that 70 to 90% of stockouts come from replenishment difficulties. Some of you may be familiar with the US retailer Target. They have offices in India as well. They're similar to a Marks and Spencer's, which is in India and the UK for those of you from other parts of the world.
They are based out of the US. However, recently they opened stores in Canada. However, they closed all stores after only 2 years and lost more than $2 billion.
One of the key reasons that was cited for their closures? Replenishment difficulties that could have been an in-store problem, a supply chain problem, or an assortment planning problem. But interviews with customers repeatedly came to the conclusion that customers went to stores, couldn't find what they were looking for, and decided to stop shopping at Target. The shelves were empty, and customers got frustrated and stopped coming back. Even though they spent a ton of money on marketing in Target's instance, it didn't matter because they didn't have the assortment they needed to maintain their business. Recent surveys on retail out-of-stocks have suggested that in-store operations are fundamental to reducing retailer stockouts. Around 70 to 90% of stockouts are caused by defective replenishment practices in stores, as opposed to the 10 to 30% resulting from upstream supply chain, such as shortages from the supplier. This is important to remember when you're managing a store because you don't want to lose your customers.
According to a study by IHL Group commissioned by Order Dynamics, overstocks and out-of-stocks cost retailers $1.1 trillion globally in lost revenue. Overstocks are responsible for 3.2% in lost revenue for the average retailer, and out-of-stocks are responsible for 4.1% in lost revenue. In North America, the loss from overstocks in the region is estimated to cost retailers $123.4 billion annually, and out-of-stocks cost $129.5 billion annually. Although better forecasting tools have resulted in improvements to both of these metrics in recent years, this is still a significant loss in revenue. This chart, created from the data from the study by IHL Group, shows who is to blame for inventory distortion worldwide. Both overstocks and out-of-stocks are shown in the largest category of internal process failure. Additional categories beyond internal process failure that lead to inventory distortion, in order of magnitude, include personnel issues, data disconnect, supplier issues, employee theft, consumer theft, and other miscellaneous issues. According to the Harvard Business Review, in a study of 71,000 consumers worldwide, it was shown that consumers have little patience for stockouts. When consumers can't find the precise product they're looking for, on average, fewer than half will make a substitute purchase, and nearly a third will buy the item elsewhere. This pie chart shows us that 26% will substitute for a different brand, while 19% will make a substitution for the same brand. Additionally, 31% will buy the item at a different retail store. This is damaging to a retailer, while substitutes for a different brand are damaging to a wholesaler. Some things to consider in order to understand stockouts include situational factors such as demographics, store knowledge and loyalty, time spent shopping, the type of shopping trip, and the social surroundings. Some consumers may not be as concerned with where they buy product as long as they find the specific product they are looking for. This is something to be considered with the type of shopping trip that is done. Demographics are also important when you consider shopping. Store knowledge and loyalty also really matters when you're considering stockouts. Loyalty is important because if a retailer has a very loyal customer base, substitution is much easier. Higher-end department stores can really rely on this, making substitute sales through their sales associates' selling abilities even when the desired product isn't in stores. The consumers are typically still happy because they have a relationship with the brand and trust the sales associates. They also trust that if they aren't happy with the product they end up purchasing, the store will help them fix the issue. Time spent shopping is another criteria to consider because consumers are more likely to substitute product if they don't want to put effort in finding the original product they saw elsewhere, or if an additional retailer may be too far away. The type of shopping trip must be considered because we must consider whether it's propulsive or impulsive. We'll talk about this more in a moment. Further, social surroundings should be considered, whether consumers are shopping with peers, shopping on their own, or shopping with family. This can influence the type of purchasing they will do or whether or not they're willing to wait to buy the product at a later date. Now, there are two key types of shopper intentions, whether it's propulsive or browsing. With propulsive shopping, a shopper is looking for a specific product, while when a shopper is browsing, they don't have a specific end goal or specific product in mind. A browsing consumer is more easily convinced to make a substitute purchase, while a propulsive shopper wants a specific item they seek, and substitution is more difficult. 93% of all shoppers have experienced stockout, and when this happens, substitution can be challenging. Of all the types of stockouts that can occur, whether it be size, color, style, size is the least flexible item. 72% of consumers will not buy the product if their exact size is not there. They are least likely to seek an alternative size, and it's most likely to result in a lost sale. Just think if you were shopping for a pair of new shoes. If the retailer did not have your exact shoe size, would you buy a different size shoe, or would you skip the product entirely? Size is challenging because we need product to fit. Following stockouts, there are 3 key purchase decisions that should be considered: a current sale, a potential sale, or a lost sale. A current sale is when another product is still purchased. This is when a substitution may occur. If the sales associate is able to help the consumer find an alternative product, or the consumer is able to find an alternative product that they like on their own, a current sale can still be made. A potential sale can refer to both a substitution or a future sale. Maybe the consumer will come back to buy the item at a later date, or to buy a different item at a later date. A lost sale is most detrimental for both wholesalers and retailers. This is because no product is purchased. Up until this point, what you should have learned is the strategy implications of propulsive customers, the importance of size range, the customer service role in stockouts, and the importance of customer loyalty. Let's consider some of the important language in assortment planning. Assortment plans include a range of choices available to the consumer. The assortment balance is the minimum inventory investment that is needed to meet the customer needs and the firm goals. When we think about planning, who in the supply chain would conduct such assortment planning? Buyers, planners, suppliers, and wholesalers? Anyone who manages a product assortment will conduct assortment planning. Now, within traditional assortment planning dimensions, a retailer or wholesaler will consider the breadth as being either broad or narrow, and also the depth of an assortment as being either deep or shallow. The breadth considers the amount of styles, while the depth considers the quantity of each style. Within the assortment planning dimensions, there are also assortment factors across different categories. For instance, in apparel, assortment factors typically include style, color, and size, while in grocery, assortment factors typically include brand, type, and size, whereas in automobiles, they typically include model, color, and engine size. You'll see some consistency across different industries, such as size, some sort of color or type, and also your broad range of style or brand. Additional measurable assortment dimensions at the finite level include SKU, which stands for a stock keeping unit. This is the smallest unique piece of an item. It's defined by the smallest assortment factor, so the style, size, or color. Assortment variety refers to how many SKUs a retailer or wholesaler may carry, while assortment volume looks at how many of each SKU is carried. Let's consider an example. If we were conducting a merchandising budget for bike shorts and we had $171,000 with 60% of our budget attributed to men's and 40% attributed to women's, with an average initial retail price of $45, what would be our merchandise budget for women's? To find that initial value of the merchandise budget for women's, we would take our total budget of $171,000 multiplied by the percent that is for women's, and we will convert that percent into a decimal to be 0.40 to get a budget for women's of $68,400. Now, what if we want to find the assortment volume for women's? And remember, assortment volume refers to how many units we want to buy for women's apparel. Well, we now know our merchandise budget in dollars, and we also know our average initial retail price. So if we want to transition this into units, we would take our total merchandise budget for women's and divide it by our average initial retail price. So we would take $68,400 divided by the average initial retail price of $45 to get 1,520 units, which is our assortment volume for women's. Now, what about assortment variety? If you remember, assortment variety would be the styles by sizes by colors. It would be telling us how many SKUs. We don't have enough information in this example to calculate our assortment variety. Let's look at another example. Let's consider the merchandise budget for men's of inline skates. We have $100,000 overall, with 55% for men's and 45% for women. Our average selling price is $195, and we want to know the assortment volume for men's. Now, to start with, we must first find out our budget for men's. So we would take our $100,000 multiplied by the portion of the budget that is for men's. So we would take our 55%, convert it to a decimal, which would be 0.55, to get $55,000. That would give us our men's budget, but then assortment volume refers to units. So we want to find out from our budget how many units we're buying of men's inline skates. We would take our $55,000 divided by our average selling price of $195. That would give us 282 units. Now, to calculate our assortment factors, which is the SKU dimension, we don't have enough information available. Looking at these factors broken down, if you recall, we took our budget multiplied by the portion for men's, and then we took the men's budget divided by our average retail price to find out our units. Now, our assortment factors and SKU information was not available to us. Thank you for listening to our first assortment planning presentation. We hope you will tune in for subsequent presentations.